No matter how much time has passed, no matter how much you have changed your living environment, how busy you are with new plans, even if someone else has entered your life, there is still someone when you think about them. Your heart aches. A name that is no longer present. A face that has not been seen for a long time. But sometimes, in an old song, in a vague dream, or in the eyes of someone passing by, they appear again, like a whisper that refuses to disappear. Why? You have tried to explain. Maybe it is love that has not ended. Maybe it is a wound that has not healed. Maybe you are just a little weak at a certain moment. But then you deny all of that. Because your reason has clearly said that relationship is over. That person no longer has any role in the present. You have moved on, have changed, have moved on. So, why does that figure still remain? The answer does not lie in whether you still love them or not, but it lies in the fact that your soul still has something unfinished in that relationship. The mind does not repeat what is clearly understood. It only persistently holds on to things that have not been fully explained. Like a song that stops halfway, a movie that ends abruptly, a hug that does not say goodbye. What makes you feel tormented is not them, but the feelings that have not had a place to put down. Many people think that missing someone after a long time is a sign of lingering feelings. But the truth can be much more complicated. It can be the calling of a part of you that once lost something when you were with that person. Maybe you once gave up a piece of your dream, once kept silent when you should have spoken, once made yourself smaller to be loved. And now, your mind does not recall that person because it wants them back, but because it wants you back to yourself. Carl Jung once said, "What you refuse to bring to light will return as fate." And perhaps the presence of that person in your mind is not destiny pulling you back, but the past that has not been fully understood is asking you to listen, not to torment, but to complete. Most of us rush to close the door of memory, thinking that it is the way to forget. But that very act of closing the door quickly causes the emotions that have not yet escaped to be stuck inside. And from there, the shadow of a person who no longer exists in real life becomes the most subtle obsession. Not clear, not intense, just a silent presence, lingering. This part does not offer a solution. There is no conclusion, because that is not the purpose. The purpose is for you to look back and ask an honest question. Do I really miss them? Or am I trying to remember a part of me that I have forgotten? This is where the inner journey begins, and you are not alone. There are things that cannot be explained by logic. You can say that you understand, that you forgive, that you let go, but there is something deeper than the mind, where without words, without reason, still holds on to an image, a feeling, a moment that belongs to that person. And no matter how many times you repeat, "I've overcome it," just a quiet moment in the middle of the night, the mind brings them back, as if inside you there is something unfinished. The human mind is very strange. It does not retain what is clear. It only repeats what is not fully understood. That is why there are people we only meet briefly, but can leave a mark for a lifetime, while there are people who stay by our side for many years, but leave without a sound. Emotions do not obey the length of time, nor do they obey reason. They go in depth, and the deeper they touch, the harder it is to forget. Carl Jung did not believe that recurring thoughts about someone were simply longing or emotional dependence. For him, they were a sign that a part of your unconscious was trying to say something. A message from within you, not from the other person, was trying to surface, waiting to be heard. The other person, perhaps, was just the person who brought about the experience. the catalyst that awakened a part of you. But the real story lies entirely with you. When a relationship ends, what disappears is not just the presence of the other person. It is also the loss of a part of yourself that they awakened. Maybe you felt more alive when you were with them, or maybe you lost yourself in order to hold on to that feeling. Either way, the relationship brought out a layer of emotion that you had never encountered before. And if you haven't really understood what happened in that deep layer, the mind will replay the memory not to torment you, but to help you understand. Memory, by its very nature, doesn't hurt. What hurts you is that you are trying to forget something that isn't understood. You want to close a door that is still ajar. You want to move on, but you leave a part of your soul behind. And it is that separation that keeps you stuck. What you refuse to touch in reality will return in dreams. What you don't dare to feel once will come to you again and again in a new form. A strange face with familiar eyes, a word that accidentally makes your heart clench, not to hurt you, but to listen. Jung believed that people don't come into each other's lives by chance. Every encounter, especially those that make you struggle with your emotions, has a psychological function. They are a mirror that reflects a part of you that you have not yet recognized. Maybe a wound from childhood, a fear of abandonment, a desire to be seen, to be understood. When that person appears, they are not just a person, they are a symbol, they are an image you unconsciously carry, wrapped up in memories, in dreams, in unnamed desires. That is why missing someone is not necessarily because you still love them. It is because the meaning they once represented in your life has not yet been clarified. When the mind repeats something, it is not a disorder. It is a healing journey waiting for you to continue, an unfinished process. So what do you do when you still think about them? Not to force yourself to stop, not to avoid, but to change the way you listen. Instead of asking, "Why can't I forget that person?" ask, "What does that person represent to me? Did they make you feel seen? Did they stir up a desire for love that you had always denied? Or was it that being with them made you a version of yourself that you were not?" These questions are uncomfortable, but they are doorways. Doors that lead you back to yourself, where you can see that person, not as someone you wanted to hold on to, but as someone who showed you what you had lost in yourself. That is where the real process begins, when you stop struggling with the memory and start going into it. When you stop fighting the memory and start talking to it. When you stop pushing them out of your mind and start seeing them clearly as a mirror, reflecting something you need to see in order to grow. The mind does not repeat itself without a reason. It does not punish you. It is trying to heal, but that healing cannot happen if you just try to forget. It needs you to look at it with honesty, with courage, and with love for yourself, because sometimes the person you are trying to forget is the one who once awakened your true self. And what you need to do now is not to find a way to erase that shadow, but to find the part you once lost in that very relationship. We often mistakenly think that when someone leaves, what remains is them, but the truth is deeper. What remains in your mind is not entirely the image of the other person, but the image of yourself when you were with them. Try to stop for a moment and be honest with yourself. What do you miss the most? Is it their smile, their eyes, or the feeling of being someone special in their eyes? Is it a long hug, or the moment you felt accepted, important, alive? That is the deepest thing. When we love someone, we love not only who they are, we also love the part of ourselves that is awakened when we are with them. Maybe you were a gentler, braver, more dreamy person when you were with them. Maybe you allowed yourself to be weak, believed in sharing, and it is the part of you that you became when you were with them that makes you feel restless. The thing is, not all of those parts are bright. In many cases, you changed to keep them. You accepted things you didn't deserve, suppressed your own needs so you wouldn't hurt them, shrunk yourself just to fit into a relationship that was slowly cooling down. And even though that relationship ended, the echoes of what you did to yourself still remain. You may never have said it, but you know it. You lost a part of yourself in that relationship. Maybe it was your self-respect. Maybe it was your inner voice. Maybe it was your ability to love yourself. And now, when they're no longer there, the parts you once put aside have not been restored. Missing, therefore, is not necessarily missing someone. It's a call from within you, from the parts you've forgotten. When Carl Jung said that the people who come into our lives are mirrors of our inner selves, he wasn't just talking about what they show us that is beautiful, but also what is incomplete, unclear, unhealed in us. And when that person leaves, we don't just lose them, we lose the opportunity to understand ourselves if we refuse to look back. So change the question. Don't ask yourself, why can't I forget that person? Ask, who did I become when I was with that person? And more importantly, what did I give up of myself to maintain that relationship? These questions can be painful because they make you face what you've tried to forget, that you once denied yourself for someone else. But it's there that you can begin the journey back. Because when you understand who you have become and what you have lost, you can begin to recover, no longer tormented by the past, no longer waiting for the return of the person who has left. There is one thing we often do not want to admit. Not everyone leaves to hurt us. Some people leave to force us to look back at ourselves. And if you continue to hold on to that person's image in your mind, it is not because they deserve to stay forever, but because you are not ready to look at the part of yourself that has been lost. You can change that, not by denying what happened, but by giving yourself back, understanding that you tried, that you loved with all your heart, and that in that journey you may have lost yourself, but thanks to that, you were able to find yourself again. The versions of you lost, the ones who were silent, the ones who were weak, the ones who dreamed, they are not wrong. They just weren't loved enough, weren't looked back on with gratitude and forgiveness. And perhaps what needs to be done is not to try to forget the other person, but to embrace those old versions of yourself with all the tenderness you never had time to give. They're no longer here, but you're still here. And now you can choose differently. You can choose to move on, not by wiping away memories, but by walking with the truth that you're slowly coming back to yourself. No longer waiting for someone else to complete you. No longer trading your wholeness for a feeling that no longer nourishes you. You miss them, but you don't need them to feel complete anymore, because the person you really need to turn to is you. Not all the people who leave an impression on you are from a love story. Some people come into your life as if designed by a greater intelligence, as if your soul recognized them before you could name your feelings. And when they leave, you don't just feel empty. You feel a loss on a deeper level than your rational mind can explain. It's not the absence of a person, but the absence of an unexplained psychological symbol. Carl Jung called them archetypes, primordial images that exist in the collective human unconscious. They are living symbols, buried deep in the psyche over thousands of years of evolution. You're not conscious of them, but they shape how you feel, love, hurt, and bond. And when someone awakens an archetype within you, Your connection with them is no longer purely personal. They become a representation of something larger than themselves. Some people come into your life as a savior, someone who seems to be able to heal all the wounds you've ever carried. Some are a light in a dark time, someone you put your trust in, even though you don't know if they really understand you. Some are like a shadow, attractive, seductive, but at the same time awakening the part of you that you've always avoided. And there are connections, however brief, that open up a deep vein within you, a feeling of being recognized, chosen, seen. They are not just them, they are a mirror of an image you've carried in your soul for a long time. That's why, when an archetype is activated without being understood, you easily fall into a state of emotional attachment so deep that you can't explain it. You start to idealize, deify, and even change yourself just to keep that connection. Because at the deepest level of your unconscious, you are no longer interacting with a person, you are interacting with a living symbol, a deep part of your unenlightened self. This explains why, even though the relationship is over, even though you know the other person is not right for you, you still think about them. Not because you want to go back, but because the image they once represented is still alive in your mind. An unexplained symbol, an unintegrated archetype, and your unconscious, through dreams, through sudden memories, is trying to bring you back to that moment. The sum not to let you go back, but to understand. Jung once said that people love not only with their hearts, but with their entire unconscious symbolic system. You love someone because they resemble the image of the person who raised you in childhood, because they evoke a distant memory that has not been healed, because they touch the part of you that you have always longed for but have not dared to face. In other words, you don't love a person, you love what they represent in your mind. The danger is that if you don't realize this, you will repeat the same pattern with other people. You will get caught up in relationships that are strangely familiar, as if you are reliving the same script, only with different actors. That's how the unconscious works. It doesn't rest until the lesson is learned. And symbols don't go away, they just change form. But this is also an opportunity. When you are conscious enough to look back on a past relationship as a psychological journey, you will see it wasn't just a breakup, it was an awakening, a message from within that there is something in you that wants to be better understood, a forgotten part, an unintegrated archetype, an unnamed fear. And when you begin to look, no longer with the eyes of the abandoned, the wounded, but with the eyes of the self-discovery, you embark on a completely different journey. No longer chasing after an ex for answers, no longer holding on to a past relationship because you are not sure who you are, but going within, looking at the awakened symbol, and asking, what are you here to teach me? True liberation does not come from forgetting the other person. It comes from understanding why they touched you so deeply. When you realize that they are just an external manifestation of an inner part that is awakening, you no longer need them to feel complete, because you begin to understand. And when you understand, you are no longer dependent. It is not that they are the only ones who can make you feel that way. It is that you yourself already have deep parts waiting to be awakened. They are just a reflection. And when the mirror breaks, the image remains until you see yourself with your eyes truly open. And that is where the healing begins, not by erasing the memories, but by making them into integrated symbols, becoming a part of you, no longer manipulating you, but guiding you. We often think of memories as things of the past, that what's gone should be folded away, put in a drawer somewhere in our minds, and moved on. But there are memories that refuse to settle, They don't stay still, they bleed from time to time, throbbing like a dull wound. Those are the unhealed memories. You know they're not healed because they make you cry every time you think about them, but because they make you avoid them every time you touch them. You'll find ways to keep busy, to rationalize things, to laugh, to cover them up. But inside there's still a part of you that shrinks, that trembles every time something touches that emotional nerve. That's not weakness. That's the voice of a part of your soul that has never been heard to the end. Maybe you were hurt in that relationship. Maybe you endured something that the other person didn't know about, but you kept quiet because you thought if you spoke up, everything would fall apart. And then you convince yourself that things aren't so bad, that you're okay, that the hurt isn't worth making a big deal out of. But the mind isn't fooled that easily. It doesn't forget. It stores it away, not to torment you, but so that one day, when you're strong enough, you can go back and see clearly. The thing is, unhealed memories don't just stay there. They become prisms. You start to see people through those prisms. You start to defend yourself against people who resemble your ex. You reject genuine affection for fear of repetition. You sacrifice yourself in new relationships to avoid feeling abandoned again. None of this is a conscious choice. It's the result of an unacknowledged past. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make your unconscious conscious, it will run your life, and you will call it destiny." And the unhealed memories are that unconscious part, the part that is silently rewriting the chapters of your life without you even realizing it. You may never have allowed yourself to really think about what happened. You just tried to move on, to do better, to prove that you got through it. But moving on doesn't mean letting go, and doing better doesn't mean you're healed. There's a part of you that's still there, where it all ended, waiting for you to come back, not to relive the pain, but to understand what you really felt. Have you ever felt abandoned, unappreciated, undervalued? Or have you ever felt like you weren't good enough, not important enough, not worth keeping? Those feelings, if left unacknowledged, don't go away. They freeze, waiting for an opportunity to be released, through dreams, recurring events, new relationships that bring up the old. It's not by chance that you're so drawn to that person, because they're not just someone who hurts you. They're the key to unlocking a deeper wound. Maybe it's a wound from childhood, when you felt like you weren't worth loving unconditionally, when you had to be good, not bother, not cry, just to be accepted. And that person, intentionally or unintentionally, touched that wound. You don't need to blame them. You don't need to blame yourself either. But you need to look back to know that what you're still carrying is not that person, but an experience that hasn't been named, hasn't been explained, hasn't been loved to the fullest. And when you understand that, the healing begins. Stop and ask, at that time, what did I really need that I didn't dare to say? What did I trade in myself just to keep an uncertain feeling? What part of you feels rejected, unchosen, unprotected? These are not easy questions to answer, but they are necessary. Because only when you reach into the deepest part of your memory, not to hurt more but to understand, can you free yourself from it. No longer controlled by old wounds, no longer seeing the world through the eyes of someone who has been hurt, but of someone who knows himself. Jung believed that no light is worth having without going through darkness, and unhealed memories are the darkness you need to enter, with all the kindness and tenderness you never had the courage to give yourself. Not everyone is willing to do that. But if you are reading this, if you are still wondering why that person still haunts you, then maybe it is time. It is time to stop silencing yourself. It is time to stop thinking that you have to be strong all the time. It's time to go back, put your hand on your heart and say, I was so sad that day. I was in so much pain, and I wasn't wrong to feel that way. Memories aren't meant to be forgotten. Memories are meant to be understood. And when you understand, you're no longer stuck in them. You're no longer running away. You're no longer waiting for someone to heal you, because you know you're the only one who can reach that deepest part, with love, with honesty, and with a belief that you deserve to be healed. At some point, after months of struggling between memories and the present, you will begin to realize the pain is not just something to overcome. It is something that awakens you. You no longer see the departure of that person as a simple loss, but as a door. The door opens a journey back to yourself, where you begin to ask yourself, who am I when I no longer try to become someone to be loved? This is the major turning point of any inner transformation. From running away from emotions, you begin to step into them. From spending all your energy forgetting someone, you focus your attention on understanding yourself. And then, a truth gradually becomes clear. The pain does not drag you down. It is you who can use it to move up. Carl Jung once emphasized that the process of individuation, the journey to becoming a whole person, is always accompanied by crisis, conflict, and the breaking of old shells. Every person you have ever loved, who has left a deep mark on you, is not an accident. They come as part of your awakening journey, and the person who hurts you the most is often the one who makes you dig the deepest inside yourself. When you stop asking, why did they do this to me? And start asking, why did I let this happen without saying anything? You are shifting. When you stop expecting a conversation to heal and start talking to your own feelings, you are entering a new space, a space of growth. You may have thought that if that person came back, if there was an apology, a belated hug, a thorough explanation, you would be free. But now you begin to understand, healing was never between two people. Healing was between you and the part of you that was abandoned. You begin to see that, all this time, you didn't really need them back. I just need something inside me to be whole again. And that doesn't come from the outside. It only comes when you have the courage to face yourself. No more denial, no more pretending to be okay, no more playing the strong role to cover up the vulnerability that has never been embraced. This is the time for you to go back. Not back to your ex, but back to your whole self, before you lost a part of yourself in that relationship. Before you learned to be silent, to be loved. Before you sacrificed your true feelings just to maintain someone's presence. Maybe you never dared to name it, but now you can. You can look straight in the mirror and say, I once disappeared myself just to keep someone. And just by daring to say it, you have taken a big step on the path to healing. Because healing is not the absence of pain. Healing is when you hurt and no longer run away from that pain. It is when you can sit with your feelings, listen to them, understand them, and then gently say, I am still here with you. I will not leave you again. The journey back is not brilliant. It is silent, quiet. It happens in seemingly small moments, when you refuse to text your ex back, even though your heart is still beating. When you stop blaming yourself for loving too much. When you accept that you are not weak, just because you still miss them. And especially, when you choose to live the way you feel is right, not to be held back by someone else. Carl Jung believed that the shadow, The rejected part of each person is where true strength lies. And perhaps your shadow is the part that was rejected in love, the hurt, the feeling of not being chosen, the needs that were considered too much. But when you dare to look at that shadow, no longer seeing it as shameful, but as a very human, very real part, you begin to restore your original energy. You don't have to be strong the way society tells you to be. You just have to be there for yourself, especially in your weak moments. That's true strength, being kind to yourself, even when you feel unworthy. And then one day, you'll look back on that relationship, without the sting, without the guilt, and with a sense of stillness. As if it was all just the way it was supposed to be. As if you're grateful for loving like that, hurting like that, and waking up from it to become a better version of yourself. You don't have to close the chapter with anger. You don't have to forget. You just have to move on, with the knowledge that he was a lesson. But the biggest lesson was you. And the most beautiful thing is not the love you had, but the person you gradually became after it all. Not everyone is ready to face themselves like you are. And that's why, even though you may not see the results today, you're still on the right path. The path back to loving yourself for the first time, completely. The end of a relationship is not the end of you. And just because someone is no longer there, it doesn't mean that the value of the feelings that once existed also disappears. Every emotional experience, whether beautiful or painful, has a deep meaning in it. And if you are brave enough to look back with an open heart, you will realize what you thought was a loss is sometimes a gift in disguise. Maybe you are not ready to call it gratitude. Maybe you still feel a sting in the corner of your eyes when you remember. But try to stop for a moment. Listen inside. After all, have you grown more mature, understood yourself better, and learned to love yourself more? If there was no relationship, if there was no breakup, would you have enough reason to go back, to listen to yourself, to start this healing journey? Carl Jung once said, "You don't become enlightened by imagining light, but by making sense of darkness." And sometimes, the people who hurt you are the gateways that lead you deeper into the darkness, the place you once feared, the place you once ran away from, but also the only place that can help you reach your truest self. Loss, when seen through the eyes of awakening, is no longer a cut. It is a sign that you are being invited to enter a new phase of your life, no longer dependent on the presence of another person to feel whole, but to begin learning to be with yourself, in silence, in clarity, in love. You don't have to forget that person to be free. You just have to understand that their role is over. They have played their part in your journey, whether by loving or by letting go. And now the rest is yours, the choice. Choose to stay in the old pain, or choose to move on with gratitude for having felt, loved, hurt, and changed. Because healing doesn't start with forgetting, but with accepting that everything happens for a reason. Not so that you can live in the past, but so that you can learn to step into the future with a heart that is no longer closed. You are at a threshold. You may not realize it yet, but the fact that you are listening to these words, going all the way to the end, means that your soul is ready. Ready to let go, not because you are exhausted, but because you understand. Ready to forgive, not because you are weak, but because you no longer want to carry the burden. Ready to be grateful, even for what is lost, because there are people who don't need to go with you to the end of the journey, but they come to give you something no one else can give, an encounter with yourself. And when you understand that, you no longer ask why they left. You just smile, whispering softly, "Thank you for coming. Thank you for letting me find myself again. In that moment, you are truly free, no longer haunted by the presence or absence of anyone. You are no longer looking for validation out there, because finally, you have found the most precious thing, the return to yourself. And there is nothing more sacred than that.